And it's actually a better quality video, it's just my Mac playing up. So, Adnan, start at CarThrottle. You get sent ridiculous supercars. How old are you?
25.
25, jealous. You bumped up since photos with you with Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, can you explain who you are and what CarThrottle is?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, salams and hello to everyone. CarThrottle is an online platform for car enthusiasts. So essentially it allows anyone around the world who has an interest in cars to connect with other people, like-minded petrolheads. But really, as you've kind of seen from that overly emotional video, it's more about creating a family. So I guess we've created a movement where we have over 5 million users who use the site every month. On social media, we reach 100 million people every single month. We're the biggest car channel in the UK on YouTube with over 1 million subscribers. And all that has basically been a journey over the last 3 or 4 years, basically after I graduated and left university. So yeah, it ties into a bigger picture for us, which is how do we create homes online for anyone that has an interest? For us, CarThrottle is just the beginning. We're launching a brand called Mystic, which is producing fashion enthusiasts, gaming enthusiasts, and that for us is essentially how we see ourselves creating something that appeals to everyone, no matter what interest they have.
Awesome. So to give you an idea of scale, we're talking about 4.3 million Facebook likes. You've got 4 million monthly users. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And amazingly, 1 million YouTube subscribers, which is like pretty phenomenal stuff. So when you, what for you was a light bulb moment that led you to kind of packing in everything you were doing and just dedicating your time to CT full time?
Yeah, I think it probably mostly started in my first year of university. So CarThrottle was literally born out of my university bedroom. So instead of studying, I just was prattling around online basically, and decided to register this domain name because I felt like there were people like me, like sort of young internet natives is what we call them now. So people that would spend all their times on social networks, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but we weren't able to serve, or there wasn't a community for people like myself. So set up the site, I was running it part-time, basically alongside university studies, and I was doing economics at uni as well, so I really shouldn't be here. I probably should be in the city doing banking and finance or accounting or something like that. So I basically just said, look, let's give this a shot. Spent 3 years essentially building the site from a content point of view, having freelancers that essentially took us to about 100,000 uniques, which at the end of university was where we were at. And at that point, I remember going to my personal tutor at uni, because I was a bit lost. I was like, I'm not really sure what I should be doing here. Should I basically go unemployed, as my mum basically put it, or should I go and get a real job, which again is what my mum said. And I decided to say, look, let's give myself a year after graduating and see what I can do within a year. Hopefully I said that, look, I've got a degree that I could fall back on, very Asian of me to say that, and I thought, right, there's one opportunity for me to give this a shot. So graduated, spent 9 months essentially bootstrapping the business from home, and then we were lucky enough to get our first pre-seed round of funding from Passion Capital 9 months after I graduated as well.
Awesome. So you mentioned a lot about content, and from what I understand, a ridiculous amount of your content is also user-generated. People call it like the kind of BuzzFeed world, the kind of BuzzFeed model. What's the kind of secret to the social journalism model, and why do you think it resonates so well with people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one, because we got started on Facebook. So around about the time we started growing on Facebook, there weren't many social pages around cars, obviously, and it was the same with general interests as well. There were pages like the Lad Bible and Unilad, they didn't exist. So we came at it at a time back in 2011 and 12 where we were actually one of the first pages, and one of our pages was called Car Memes, which pretty much is self-explanatory. It's memes about cars. So it had about 100,000 fans, and it was being run by a student out in Bristol. So I met with the guy and I said, look, you should bring this in-house. We'll buy the page of you, start working for us full-time. And he helped to kickstart that Facebook movement. So we went from 100,000 fans to 1 million in like a couple of months, because there was no competition. We were the only ones producing content. And in terms of what content we were producing, it was just highly shareable stuff. Images, videos, things that a petrolhead would relate to. So, I don't know, memes about driving a BMW if you're a BMW fan, or a meme about Top Gear, or an image about Top Gear. And slowly but surely it turned from creating images about car content to creating news about car content. So we would have social videos, the biggest car fails of the week, or you'll never guess what Jeremy Clarkson you'll never guess who he just punched in the face, stuff like that. And we started to get a lot of traffic through to the site, and each time we would get these links from Facebook, it would literally take our site down. There was that many concurrents were hitting the site all at once. So soon after that, I realised I was pretty crap at running a website, and we actually hired some professional people, who was my CTO, to come in and start building the tech operation behind it. But essentially, social is quite difficult now. There are all of these platforms out there. So you've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Vine, YouTube. There are so many different platforms, and I think, without being too pessimistic, the Facebook wave has now kind of moved on. It's very difficult to gain traction for new pages, but there are so many opportunities now within platforms like Snapchat to create something different. So just on Snapchat, we get a couple of million views per day on our snaps, and it's basically just behind the scenes stuff. It'll be us going out shooting cars, telling people what we're doing behind the scenes, going into the office, cracking around on Snapchat. People seem to like that, don't know why. And that's kind of just something that we're looking to build. But I would say for you guys, try and figure out what the next wave is, whether it is being on Snapchat or using Instagram as a distribution model for content. And obviously content is just one aspect. If you're into the world of e-commerce, then we can still use these platforms to gain distribution. But the biggest thing which I tell my team is, content is easy to create. Anyone can create good content. And you can see it all the time with the number of tweets that go viral and things that get shared a lot. But how you distribute that content is the most important part. So find the right platforms through which you can distribute content. Try and liaise with influencers. Influencer marketing is really big right now. So finding people that can help seed and spread your message. And I guess it's essentially what you guys have done. You found ways to kind of spread the Muslamic Makers word and hashtag, and it's exactly the same principle. But you just need to look for those new opportunities there.
You mentioned not having a CTO, and you reached a point where you decided, okay, I really need to get someone who knows their stuff. What advice would you have to people who are full of ideas? It's maybe that technical knowledge and skill that prevents them from kind of making their side projects a reality. Yeah,
I mean, first and foremost, I think it's important if you're running a tech startup to at least understand technology to a certain extent. So what is a domain name? What is hosting? Like how can I change the look and feel of my site if I wanted to? So very early on, in fact, so my first website was when I was back in school. So it was a community called Blogtrepreneur. And I basically ran that, and it was a blog, and then over time I thought, right, I need to change that. So I'd jump into I'd mess around in HTML and CSS and go, right, how can I change this? And I'd break it. And then I'd try again and it would work, and I'd copy someone else's code and copy and paste. So it's just a lot of hacking, and that I guess is what hacking now. Obviously, if anyone reads like Hacker News and all of these sites, hacking isn't saying that you're hacking into the FBI's mainframe. It's more just like, how can I basically apply certain things and use it in a different way. It's probably a very bad definition of it, but it's how can I make the most out of limited resources. So for me, I couldn't hire a full-time CTO. I was still at uni, I didn't have any cash. So it was about, what can I do on a budget? Then after that, it was about, right, I know enough HTML and CSS, but we want to add in user-generated content areas of the site. So I basically asked in favours. I said to a couple of mates I knew that could develop, and they were WordPress gurus essentially, and we were running off WordPress back at that time. So I said, can you give me a hand? Learned from them a little bit of PHP. That was enough to kind of get me through to the next stage. And then obviously when we got funding, we were able to actually build the tech team. But I would say leverage anyone that you possibly can, ask for help. But the internet is your friend. You can learn on sites like Treehouse, Code Academy. There are all of these online tutorials available to you now, which weren't necessarily around back in 2009, 2010. So there is a wealth of information that you can use, and you should use it, and you should build up a basic understanding of how websites and web platforms, and I would now say mobile apps. I mean, web platforms for us, we see most of our activity inside our apps, and we haven't even launched our iOS app yet. Big mistake. So, which is actually coming out this week, so cheeky plug. So understand and try and create your own apps as well, because I think that's the next frontier. Everything is app-based. It has been for the last two years. Web and desktop traffic for us is like 15%. 85% of our audience is mobile. That's where they are. You need to be there as well if you're in the content game.
That kind of leads me on to my next question. So a lot of focus on networking, social journalism model emphasizes on building mobile first, but obviously with CT you guys kind of launched your app fairly late. what was the thinking behind that? And if there wasn't any thinking, what was your thoughts behind that?
It's a lot easier to develop. There's a philosophy called like Agile Development. So it's essentially you're using principles of lean development. So testing very quickly, iterating very quickly. With desktop, I don't know, in fact, how many people are developers or front-end developers or engineers? Okay, cool. So you'll know that obviously with desktop, you can push code faster. It's very easy to make changes if you need to. With mobile, especially with Apple, as we found out, the development cycles are prolonged. With Android, it's better. iOS isn't there. So with desktop, you can test out ideas really quickly. And obviously, if it's responsive, it scales down to mobile, web, and phones as well. So it allows you to move quickly. And I think that's really important when you're running a startup. We always had an end goal and a vision, which was initially, we want to be top gear for the Facebook generation. Over time, that's become we want to power enthusiast sites, and we want to be the sites and the platform through which enthusiasts discover and share content. But in order to get to that end goal, that mountain, you've got to keep going, basically like pinballing around until you get to the top. And unless you can move really quickly, both from a content and product point of view, it's going to be very difficult to get there. So our teams are very small in terms of the product teams that we work with. We've got 22 employees in total in London and now New York as well, but the teams are very independent and they can move very quickly if they need to make decisions. They don't run things past me if they don't need to, because I think the main thing that you should be looking to do is eliminate all points of bottleneck. If you can allow your teams to move quickly, it allows you to test things quicker. When you can test things quicker, you can generally find the right path for you.
So you mentioned you've got 22 employees now. What would you say is the kind of process, or the process that you've been through, from everything from kind of hiring your CTO, your agreeing on terms with the co-founder? Like how do you ensure you're getting the best person to work alongside with you? Like how have you found it?
Yeah, I mean hiring is difficult, and I can say that having successfully been through hiring and successfully been through firing, that doesn't sound right. But you have to. You read a lot of things about hiring, and one of the main things is hire slowly and fire fast. But it's not as easy as that, because as you all know, like especially when you grow up around people, it's like firing someone from your family. You don't just say to your brother, "Right, see you later, mate, you're off." You develop relationships and bonds with people, and so I think the biggest learning for me has been identifying cultural fit. And again, cultural fit is mentioned a lot. But what is cultural fit? Well, it's making sure that these people are aligned with your company vision, and also making sure that they have the personality traits that you want to mirror in your organization. So that's something that we look for at times more than skill and aptitude. And that's difficult because you can't ever learn what someone is like unless you work with them side by side for 2 or 3 months. So we ask a lot of things in interview processes. Our interview processes are generally fairly prolonged over multiple rounds, and the first round will be with me, then the second round will be with another member of the team, and then we'll have a social activity so we can see how they interact. All because we need to build up as full a profile as we possibly can when we're hiring, because it's such an important part, especially when you're early stage. The first 10 employees, and I'm lucky that all of the first 10 are still with the business today, and that's been 3 or 4 years, they are instrumental to your success because they are going to be your heads of engineering, your heads of sales, your heads of content in our case. And unless you hire people that are as driven, as motivated as you are, you're going to run into issues. So hiring-wise, in terms of best avenues, the first 10, funnily enough, are all through personal network and referrals. So again, we've used recruiters for the next batch of employees, but generally speaking, I would kind of err on the side of saying use recruiters very sparingly in your early stages. Don't rely on recruiters. They're not incentivized to find people that have the same cultural fit as you need. As much as they'll tell you they are, they're not. So yeah, I would say cultural fit, hiring for cultural fit is super important, and trying to make sure that you found the best people as opposed to just hiring very quickly is again very important.
I remember reading an article on the BBC about how you kept a diary of your first kind of 12 months. I read stuff about your neighbours thinking you were a drug dealer because you're getting all these like crazy cars delivered to your doorstep. What was that first year like for you personally, and what were the kind of biggest challenges that you faced in that first year?
I think one of the biggest challenges, and again, how many people here are they run a business or they want to start a startup or in the process of starting a startup? Okay, cool, a couple, and hopefully all of you at some point. One of the biggest things that you'll face is, I guess, self-doubt. It's knowing that this might not work. And this is a huge thing, which is the fear of failure. And actually, over in the States, it's a lot more acceptable to chalk down failures as successes. Whereas in the UK, it's still quite backward. I mean, again, speaking as the majority Asians here, you're gonna get your family going, "Oh, Beta, what happened to that business?" And you're like, "Oh God, I don't want to talk about this right now." So in the first kind of 9 months, it was dealing with a lot of kind of not haters. We never really had. We did have haters. Haters are my motivators. Is that something? But it was basically learning to conquer those self doubts. So I kept a diary that sounds quite sad and quite like last just cooped up at home writing thoughts in my diary. But I kept like a journal, and when I had meetings, I'd write it down in my notebook. And also, there was one time I remember, it was 3 months into this kind of 1 year journey of giving myself an opportunity, and things were just flat. There was no growth, our revenues were kind of flat, and we were making enough where we could pay off our contributors, but we weren't making enough where there was actually significant revenue growth. And that's the hardest part actually in terms of a startup. When things are going well, you can see there's a nice hockey stick graph up and to the right. When things are flat, you're not sure whether things are really working or things are like not going so well. And actually, oftentimes, if you have like no users and no revenue, you know pretty quickly that things aren't working. So we were in this kind of period of transition where things weren't quite working out, and I found it really tough. And as a single founder, I didn't really have anyone that I could bounce ideas off. That's actually another thing I would strongly encourage all of you to try and find a mentor or someone that can at least help you on your journey. It doesn't matter if they've been in a tech startup or not, even if it's just someone that you can go to with like your agony on, your issues, and they can kind of be your counselor as well. And I've had I still have a couple of mentors that I can pick up the phone to and say, this just isn't working, and they'll be there on a Sunday night when I'm stressing or when I need to talk to someone. And you can't really go and talk to your family because they don't really understand, and that's no discredit to my own family, but running a tech startup is very different to running a dental practice, which my dad does. So I don't really have the same kind of issues as he does. So it's really important to find people that can associate with you. But I found that really tough. But powering through the dip, I always had the dream in mind in terms of what we could be. And there was a need for it in the market. And I thought, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. So I better do it first. And essentially, that's what kept me driven. That we still haven't achieved what we're set out to achieve yet. Unless everyone in the world that is into cars knows CarThrottle, my mission still exists.
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit more about like funding and your kind of routes towards that. So you raised like a significant amount of money. How did you go about doing that, and what's your advice to founders who are raising funding? What kinds of things should they look out for?
Funding is it's a good one, good topic. So just to give you a bit of story there, we've raised just over $2 million over the last couple of years. In various rounds. So the last round was kind of our big seed round, 1.6 million. And we've raised from some really good people actually. So Passion Capital, who are based just down the road. Blake Chanley, who is the first international employee of Facebook. James Bromley, who is the MD of Mail Online. And those things have come about through very random stories sometimes. So let's start with Passion Capital. They were our first investors. During 9 months into this kind of 1 year period working from home, I thought everyone says never to cold email an investor. And I thought, you know what, let's just give it a shot, see what happens. So I remember cold emailing Stefan Glaenzer, who's one of the lead partners at Passion Capital. And I said, look, here's who I am, I've got 100,000 users, here's the dream, the top gear for the Facebook generation, there's a huge market here, here's the traction that we've had so far, I'd love to kind of pick your brains and kind of grab a quick coffee with you because you're an inspirational person, you've done this with Last FM, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know why he replied within 10 minutes, and he just did. He's never replied to me that quickly ever again. But he was just straight bam going, cool, yeah, let's meet up for a coffee. So I went the next week, sat down with him. Week after that, sat down with all the partners. Week after that, got a term sheet. Now, I wish it had been that easy for every single one of my rounds after that, but it's not. Going forward from that, our angel investors have come from referral contacts. Angel List is a really good resource, which I strongly encourage all of you should check out at least and or use. And then just sometimes just random spontaneous hustling. So you'll be at a random event and they'll say, oh, I know someone that you should go and talk to, and you'll go and talk to them, and you go and talk to that person and that person and that person, and it just becomes this web. And again, I don't like to overly use quotes, but Steve Jobs said it quite well when he said you can only connect the dots looking back. And if I look at some of the connections that we've had, a lot of them have been, like James Bromley, great example. So he was the MD of Auto Trader and Mail Online. And I caught him tweeting about cars one day, and he had just bought this brand new car, and I thought, oh, he must be a bit of a petrol head. So I said, oh, we just did a review of this car on the site. He DMs me going, oh, I'd love to pick your brains about this car, shall we meet up for a coffee? 3 years later, he's like on my board, closest mentor, and have actually been really influential in terms of who he's been putting us in touch with as well. So again, spontaneous connections, you can never write this stuff, but so long as you are, another quote, God, why am I quoting so much today? The more you practice, or the harder you practice, the luckier you get. I think it was a golfing quote applied to how did this guy get so many holes in one. And that's what he said. The more you practice, or the harder you practice, the luckier you get. And I believe it's the same with business. The more times you put yourself out there, the more opportunities you give yourself, you will have access and things will just happen for you. And sometimes you just got to believe it from within, that things will work out for you. And I know personally that things have come about quite spontaneously. Now for the next round that we're doing, which is kind of our Series A, which we're in the process of doing now, it's a much more different process. It's very structured. You have your hit list of VCs that you want to talk to. You try and get warm introductions, because cold introductions definitely don't work with these guys. And you have to really leverage your network and say, right, who do I know that will know that person there? And then it's about connecting and finding loops through to these VCs, and then pitching them the big vision. The one thing that I don't think British entrepreneurs do well enough is pitching this $1 billion idea vision. We're all quite, modest, and like, it's gonna be all right. Yeah, is this going to be a big $1 billion business? Yeah, it'll do right. A couple of million quid. No, investors don't want to hear that. They want to hear that you can change the world. And I think British entrepreneurs aren't very comfortable with overly selling themselves, but really you have to, because you're going up against the likes of this Harvard graduate in the States who is, in his mind, changing the world. And an investor is much more likely to go to this guy and say, right, I'm going to deploy my capital in an area where I'm much more likely to get a return, which is this guy changing the world, rather than this person who's going to do all right. So, I don't know, I just encourage everyone to think big. The world's your oyster, like, things can happen, just dream big and it can happen.
Did you ever consider an accelerator? And if not, what's your kind of thoughts on, if you've got an idea, there's an accelerator out there that kind of matches? Just your thoughts on accelerators.
So we never went through an accelerator. I guess you could say that Passion Capital and working at White Bear Yard, if you guys are familiar with it, a co-working space just down the road, sort of acted like an incubator in that you sit on the same floor as your investors, and there's a constant pressure to perform because there are other startups around you who are killing it really, really, and they're rapidly iterating as well. So I'm a fan of accelerators. I think the great thing about London now is there's such a huge amount of early stage capital. And again, that wasn't the case 6 or 7 years ago, where there weren't that many seed funds. Passion Capital were actually one of the first early stage funds to focus on the seed market. So yeah, I would say it's great. Use it. Use accelerators as much as you can. Apply to as many as you can if you're in your early stages. There is no downside aside from, I think they take varying amounts of small percentages of equity in return for like 20, 30, 40k. But that 20, 30, 40k will allow you to work on your idea hopefully full time for a couple of months up till demo day. And more than just the cash and the equity, it's about the that time pressure. It's like Y Combinator. You're working for 3 months towards a deadline and a goal, and that social external pressure just forces you to focus. And otherwise you're going to be sat at home like I was for 9 months with very little pressure, aside from mum telling me to get a job. Basically just starting to, it's good to have that kind of external stimulus and external push. So there are a lot of accelerators out there. I probably am not best to discuss which are the best and which are the worst. I've seen a lot of them. They all seem like they offer some good mentoring and cash and advice, but more often than not, you're the people that will know what's best for your business. And that's the one thing about mentors and the one thing about investors. If they say to you, right, I'm going to promise you this and that contact, and oh, you need me on board because I'll introduce you to that person and your business is going to explode, it like 99.99% of the time, it never happens. That one customer will not make or break you. It's prolonged, sustained effort over multiple years, which is why the term overnight success never applies, because it's never an overnight success. It's taken you 3 or 4 years. So always be wary about finding or hoping that one big customer will launch you. You've got to keep sustaining that effort over a period of time.
So I noticed the new venture for you. I think you mentioned it as well. IMS. Can you explain a little bit more about that? How it fits in with kind of your vision and what the future looks like for you in terms of these new things that you're pursuing?
Yeah, of course. So as I said at the beginning, we've now all realised that these enthusiast communities only exist on very broad-based social networks. So communities have kind of existed online since the beginning of time, with email lists and then virtual worlds, Second Life, and then broad-based social networks, Facebook and Instagram. But we believe the next wave are going to be very vertical focused and have the same platform technology that powers them, because platform is so important and having a great product is so important. So for us, we believe that there are 2 billion users online now. A quarter of those have deep interest in something, whether it's cars, whether it's beauty and fashion, whether it's gaming, whether it's football. We believe that we have the platform that can power all of these sites, and we understand the model of building a community with content. So our long-term aim essentially is to say to all of the old big publishing houses that have brands, this is not how you do it, because one-directional publishing brands, like essentially we're up against the likes of Autocar and Whatcar and Evo and all of these very specific magazines, but they don't exist well on the internet. Whereas Facebook pages and Instagram pages, they're great, but the conversation is not very good because all it is you tagging your mates in the comments. So there's a medium between them which we think exists and which we've kind of proven so far with CarThrottle, and we just need to keep building out.
So a little bit more of a personal question because I haven't asked you enough really. What does your routine look like? So explain like a day in the life of Adnan, CEO, CarThrottle.
Oh god, a day in the life. I won't get into that much detail, it's not quite disturbing. So generally speaking, we're quite flexy in terms of hours. So we tend to start the working day from between 9 and 10, but then we'll work really late through the night actually. This week has been horrific. So yesterday I was in the office until 2 a.m, which is nuts. But it's every single day is different. I know that's kind of strange, but let's say yesterday in the morning, so we're doing this thing called the Gumball Rally. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. So we're doing that this year, and it's essentially a big road trip from Dublin to Bucharest, and you drive a car and it's you party at night and blah blah blah. And so I took my car off to do wraps in the morning, then we shot a video after that, came back to the office. The iOS app is launching, so we're checking with the product team as to how far along they are, making last minute changes, ironing out the bugs, submitting that to Apple. Then on the sales side, checking with the sales team, any campaigns in progress. So we do campaigns with the likes of Xbox, Forza, EA, talking to those guys about how they're performing, if they need my help. And it's essentially at this kind of stage, it's more they're capable of going and performing their own activities. But if they need assistance, if there's something they don't know how to do, if there's some contact that they need, that's what I'm there for. My job is essentially to make sure they are as efficient as possible with how they operate. So yeah, a day could be varied, a weekend could be varied, and it is 24/7 right now, but it's fun. And when you do something that you love, it doesn't feel like work. And even though some days do feel like work when I'm doing accounting and numbers and that kind of stuff, the rest of the time it's I know. Shit. Good luck. Yeah, it doesn't feel like work when you're basically part of that atmosphere and around good people. And that's why, again, I don't want to focus on hiring too much, but on this journey you have to be surrounded with great people, because they can motivate you when you don't feel motivated, and you can motivate them when they're not so motivated as well. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good.
So from a lot of the snaps I've seen, from a lot of the footage I've seen, it looks like you have like a ridiculous fun time doing what you do. But it looks like you're all really good friends. It looks like your team culture is like on point. How do you maintain? How do you get work done? Because a lot of the time I see it looks like really good fun, right? But how do you kind of maintain that kind of team structure of being like, we're all enjoying this, but at the end of the day, we've got to like, go live with something in an hour or so,
Well, here's the thing with social media. We only show you guys what we want you to see. So you don't see us in the office until 1:30 a.m. Crying into our laptops. In terms of managing that, so first and foremost, we are friends, but we're colleagues at the same time. We've just found a happy medium where we can talk about business intensely and have very intense debates, and then the next second we go out for lunch and it's like we never had that chat. But you have to have that healthy balance, and I guess for me as founder, it's important to make sure that there's still people know that when it comes down to talking about business, you don't mess around. And the best ideas always win. It's not about ego, it's not about who has the loudest voice, it's about which ideas are the best. And the best ideas will win out. And that's a culture thing that we've tried to encourage as well. And sure, yeah, on some days it can be really fun and we're doing cool stuff with cars, but the next day it'll be back-to-back meetings in the office, or thinking about the next wave of product, or in a sales pitch and sales meetings. And those aren't necessarily the cool things you'll see on Instagram and Snapchat, but it's almost as important. But yeah, I think it comes down to healthy respect. We all have a lot of respect for each other, and we know that everyone is experts at what they do, otherwise they wouldn't be there in the first place. Once you realise that, it removes all sense of ego away from running the company, and it moves you towards how can we be the best, without each person thinking, I want to be the best.
Awesome. You touched a little bit on it there about being kind of the founder and the responsibility that kind of role obviously brings. What's your advice? What would be your kind of like golden tips for like first-time founders, like through like mistakes you've made, stuff you've learned along the way, just for all of us out here who might want to be like founders of great startups one day?
Yeah, I'd say the first is like you need to develop a really thick skin, especially in the media industry. So one of the first, I was talking about haters earlier. One of the first, I guess, negative bits of PR we had was very, very early on in the first year after I graduated. So we ran some quite controversial pieces at that time, which some manufacturers didn't like. And manufacturers are very used to essentially press being honest, but telling them what they want to hear. And so we would do really random things, like instead of reviewing a Volkswagen Polo GTI, we created a music video about it. And instead of reviewing a Hyundai Veloster Turbo, we recreated Thrift Shop and did a Shift Shop parody. Weird stuff. Very weird time of my life. I would not encourage you to look at that on YouTube, because it's fairly horrific. But they would come back to us and we would get a lot of industry insiders going, these guys are a joke, these guys are young, what are they doing? They don't know what they're talking about. And it kind of blew up quite big. I got one of these guys messaged or emailed the products that UCL. And we weren't necessarily a UCL spun-off company, but the CarThrottle was supposed to receive a prize, and the prize got rescinded and taken away because this guy actually went to the union and told him that he was disgusted with what we were doing. He was obviously a bit of a... So anyway, what was the point? The point was develop a thick skin, because especially in this industry, you're going to have a lot of people saying a lot of things about you. So long as you know what you want to achieve, you've got to brush it off sometimes and it will happen. The second thing is founder tips. Surround yourself with good people. Again, I'm going to say that again, but whether it's mentors or employees or your team, make sure you can trust and rely on people, because they're going to hold you through the tough times, and they're the type of people that will push you through the dips. Other than that, I mean, it's making sure that you are pushing forward to, you have a big vision. Don't settle for something small. If you think that there's potential for this to change the world, then change the world. The world's out there ready to be changed. The world's your oyster. And really on that front, as a founder, you have to make sure that you are, I don't like using the word hustling, but you are hustling 24/7, because in the early days, there will be sleepless nights. There will be issues that you have. You're going to have to do things that you don't want to do. I mean, I was doing, in the early days, it was everything, like editing videos. I was shooting videos with the team, I was editing photos, I was creating content, I was writing blogs, I was doing the press, I was doing the accounting, I was doing the bookkeeping. Like, you have to do everything, and especially if you're a non-tech founder, you essentially have to pick up everything else that isn't technology, because that's your role. Technology obviously is key to what we're producing, but there are other things that go into building a product as well. And then really, the final part is take care of yourself. Now that sounds a bit weird, but in the very early days of CarThrottle, I didn't really have a work-life balance. I mean, I would spend literally 24/7 on this, to the point where I wouldn't meet up with mates because I had to get that thing done. But the biggest advice that was ever given to me was from my mentor, and he said, life is a marathon, not a sprint. And like too often we think, right, if I don't achieve this by a certain age, if I'm not the world's richest man by the age of 25, then I've failed. Remove that thought from your brain, because things take time, and actually you'll burn yourself out. And it's just unnecessary pressure that you'll put on yourself. Whereas actually, if you have a long-term vision and don't put yourself, or don't have time limits on where you need to go by what stage, oftentimes it makes it easier to stomach. And it's something that you've got to really take care of. Make sure you're staying healthy and active, because no one wants someone that's just stuck on their laptop all day. It's not healthy for you. So take care of yourself.
Awesome. So we've got one last question, and then we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. So start thinking about your questions, but also listen to response. So what has been your single biggest highlight?
Oh, that is a difficult one. I've got a couple.
You can have to.
So the first was last year. So again, we had managed to get media press access for this Gumball 3000 rally. And I was on the grid on one of these rallies, and it was in Los Angeles. And again, these people had like flown us out, and it was incredible. And on the rally, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Lewis Hamilton. And there's Lewis Hamilton walking towards. And so I managed to have a chat with him for a couple of minutes and tell him about CarThrottle and get to meet him. Really nice guy. And yeah, it was just like one of those kind of surreal moments. I'm not too much of a celebrity fanboy, but at that point I was like, that's pretty good. I can shut that one down. And then the other one was, sometimes like the driving ones are the best. So it was me, myself, Alex, who's our editor-in-chief, and the guy that is the front of the YouTube channel, Gabor, who's my head of marketing. And it was just a drive. We had these press cars, like a BMW M4, there was like an Aston Martin Vanquish, a Jaguar F-Type. We were like testing, doing a video review. And it was a Sunday, and we were just driving, and it was a sunny day. And that sounds really like cliche and weird, but we were doing something that we loved, and it was on a weekend, and it wasn't even in the office, but we all just kind of, after this like 1 hour drive, we just sit there and go, we're lucky to be doing what we're doing. And sometimes you've got to accept that actually certain amounts of luck will help you, whether it's down to faith, God, luck, whatever you want to call it. You also have to believe that, be thankful of what you've got. And that's one thing that in the early days I wasn't thankful enough. And now I can kind of sit back and say, I'm lucky to have what I have. We want more, we will always push for more, but enjoy the good times. Because there are a lot of bad times, without being too pessimistic. But yeah, enjoy the good times, because it keeps you sane, and it keeps you wanting more.
Awesome. That's some great advice. So we're going to open up for questions now, so just throw up your hands. Okay, yeah.
As a founder, you have to look after everything. How do you maintain your discipline?
Yeah, good question. So I tend to have a very structured workday, firstly. So I will get into the office relatively late, so I start at around 10. But I will always work until kind of 8 p.m, go back home, dinner, carry on until 12 or 1. And I know that for me, evenings are when I'm most productive. So during the daytime, I'll make sure I schedule all my meetings and calls, meetings with the team. And then evenings, I'll be able to actually do some actual work. Writing, PR, whatever it is, accounts, what have you. So keeping that structure means I do have that discipline there. And then on top of that, I think it's reliance on my team members to make sure that they can reach me whenever they need, whenever I need to be reached. Sorry. So, excuse me. In terms of if we're out on it's Thursday, Friday, and now I need to be contacted, we all use Slack, same as you guys. Slack is amazing, and I'm contactable 24/7. And because of that, it means that I'm disciplined enough to say, right, I will make sure that I answer you within half an hour to an hour. And I make sure that everyone knows that if they need me, I'm there. All you got to do is ask. So I don't know if that answers your question well, but basically having a structured day is the most important part for me.
There's a question over here, and then I'll come to you.
What are the core values of your organisation? And now you're a millionaire, multi-millionaire, do you have a CSR
On paper.
policy? Do you have a CSR policy?
Oh, that's a good question. So in terms of the core values of the company, this is something that we actually addressed quite recently. So less from a CSR point of view, more in terms of a company culture point of view, we have a set of guidelines. And those guidelines will be as detailed as how you should approach company meetings, all the way through to how you should respect other people within the business. And as I said, kind of when we're looking at hiring, culture fit and culture is super important in developing a healthy respect and a respectful culture. And especially as we start to hire in people who have more diverse backgrounds, people from around the world. So we have not only in New York, but we have moderators and staff that are based all around the globe. So we have to make sure that we are all encompassing, that we are non-discriminatory, and that all of those processes are in place. And in the early days of a startup, the last thing you're probably thinking about is, let me set out our culture guidelines. And so it's almost one of the things that you have to have in the back of your minds as a founder very early on, and that you maybe just voice it to people. And if they overstep the mark, you're saying, right, that's not how we operate here as a company. And there have been so many times when I've had to do that, not because they've messed up, but because they didn't know. And so open communication is super important, and actually, again, it's something that I've always been taught, which is you can never communicate enough to people within the company. From a CSR point of view, honestly, we don't have a set policy right now in terms of the responsibility that we want to pass on, but I guess it's philanthropy as well. Well, there are projects. It's not something that I've actually discussed right now, but there are things that we do within the company. We have our policies inside. We support various charities as an organisation. So, do I think it's important? 100%.
Next question, yeah.
What's my question? So, I came in about 10 minutes late, so sorry already said this, but how do you first get your first team members to kind of buy into your idea?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Did you kind of have a lot of traction by then, or were you sort of still at the ideation stage when you first got people to buy in?
So the very, very first employee we had was essentially a mate from school who could shoot video. So we got invited along to this press day for Volvo. They were launching some new saloons and estate cars, not necessarily perfect for our audience. But we said, right, we're going to shoot a video. We'd never done video before. So I essentially had to pitch the idea to my friend. And so I pitched him this kind of big idea, the big long-term vision, and broke that down into what we could achieve there and then. So went out and bought this kind of really crappy £500 Handycam, and we went out and just shot. And later on down the line, when we hired our first editor, again, it was pitching the bigger vision, because people want to join a movement. People don't necessarily just want a standard job. Like, I would throw that completely aside, even though we've all had jobs and internships and whatnot, and it might appear that the people in those organizations just want a 9-to-5 job. Most people want so much more than that. They want to be part of something that's big. So sell them on that dream and idea that this could be something that could be huge. And you're getting in from the ground up, so I'm going to give you certain responsibilities you might not have. I might give you access to an employee option share pool. Even though you might take a hit on your salary, the work that you're going to be doing is more fulfilling. So whatever you're doing, I'd say it's important to pitch the big vision, because you want people that care about it as much as you do.
There was someone next to you.
So I assume in your industry there's not many women that apply. Do you do anything actively to try and get women and encourage them to apply to your companies?
Yeah, that's a good question. So so when we were 10 guys and no females, and it was the industry that we were in, automotive, and unfortunately tech, in terms of the state it is, was quite worrying. So did we actively do anything to try and get more females on board? No, because to be honest, the best employees, I don't look at gender when it comes to hiring. So I don't actively go out and say, right, we need to find more girls to fill in roles, because we do get females applying for roles, and if they're good and if they're better than the other competition, we'll hire them, and if not, we won't hire them. So it changed with Misfit, because with the beauty and fashion side, we were hiring editors for that, and all of the applicants were female. But I didn't go and say, we need more male applicants to fulfill it. They were just the best at what they did. They had the best CVs, they were best in interviews, and so we hired them instead. Do I think it's a general problem with both industries? 100%. I think in tech we don't have enough female founders, generally females in tech. And I know there are all of these great initiatives like Girls Who Code, Girls in Tech, and I'm completely behind it, because we shouldn't be pigeonholed. This isn't. We're lucky that we live in a society where anyone can do whatever they want, and we try and we're always fair when we're hiring. There's nothing that we'll do to say, right, we'll actively discriminate against males to hire females or the other way around. It's just we'll hire the best people.
Awesome. Yeah.
What are some of the features of the way that you put your community together that you're going to take to the next community and the next one, so that people will be able to look at it and see the brand behind it and be able to know something about the community before they step in? This is what the experience is going to be like.
Yeah, really good question. So there are 3 things that we believe makes up a great community. The first is creating and owning content. So actually, if you look at Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, very few of them will own and operate their own content. We're seeing it more and more with Snapchat now, Instagram as well. They'll have content teams out at the Oscars and the Grammys actually shooting content for Instagram. But ownership of content is actually becoming more and more of an issue in this industry, and we believe that we've got that correct model for doing it. The second part is in being the best at social distribution. So in order to reach the new audiences today, you have to be where they are. And right now, they're not on your app, they're using someone else's app or someone else's platform. So you need to make sure that you are the best at reaching them where they are. And the third and final part of creating a great community is creating a great platform, a great product. For us, that starts with a feed, that starts with communities within the feed, that starts with algorithmic weighting, that's trending topics, messaging between users, our own comment stack, data so we can serve relevant information and content to relevant users. And we don't believe anyone's built up a combination of all of those 3. And then also the human touch. And again, it's not something you'll see on Facebook and Snapchat, but we are all very active within our own community, and people will ask us questions. And they love seeing us get involved with our own community. It makes it more personal. And you get that lock-in effect with users as well.
Yep.
So, yesterday, as you, of course you know, Clarkson, Hammond and May announced Drive Tribe, which appears to be their equivalent of this. You're doing something right. You're doing something right. What's your first thoughts? You know, when you saw that, what's the first thing running through your head?
Yeah, so I caught wind of that last month. So we kind of had some tip-offs, I guess is the wrong word, but tip-offs that they were launching something and investing in another platform. For me, it's great news. It sheds more light on the industry. It means that when we're pitching for investment, the fact that ex-Top Gear boys are doing something in this industry, it gives it real weight. Am I worried? No. Without being too harsh, although I'm about to put out some good press about it, they don't understand the internet like we do. They don't understand, they're not internet natives. We believe that we know how to build a better platform for our own users. We understand how they interact. We know that they're on Snapchat. Is Jeremy Clarkson on Snapchat? Definitely not. He might be too, but he's not right now. So we would like to think that we're kind of quite far ahead of where they're at. But it's welcome competition. Look, there are so many competitors in this space. Every single year there are 2 or 3 car communities that launch. It's a very valuable market. Cars are the second biggest expense you'll have. Advertising is a huge market. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars are spent on car ads. Whoever controls that market is going to win big time. So everyone wants to get in, but yeah, we'd like to think we can do it better.
We've got time for one more question, and then you guys can.
I'll do more questions at the end. Yeah.
So yeah, go.
Where in the world is your biggest market?
US, so 35% of our audience is in America. Then it's UK, Canada, Australia, so basically the English-speaking countries. But after that, complete split in terms of worldwide. So we have like India's in our top 10 countries, and then we also have China and the Far East are rapidly growing as well. So that's the thing with this global community is it's very much geo-split. So yeah, US biggest market.
That was a fairly quick question, so I'll get for one more. The other question.
Can you just share a bit about your own personal relationship with cars, like your first car and what you're driving now?
Oh, this is where I get exposed. My first car was a Toyota Yaris, 1 litre, 3-door, and my dad wrote it off. Yeah, he crashed it. Yeah, he got lift off oversteer on a roundabout. I didn't even think he knows what lift off oversteer is. So he crashed it. Next car after that was a BMW M3, which I loved, which I just got rid of, and now I own a Nissan GTR. So yes, my parents don't like it at all because it's tuned as well. So I look like the stereotypical Asian rude boy, like going down the street, kind of tinted windows, blacked out car, making stupid noises from the exhaust, and it's probably too quick. So I try not to get myself in an accident anytime soon. But I've always been in and around cars from a young age. My cousin was a big petrol head. He introduced me to cars, so I've grown up in and around the car industry.
Awesome. So feel free to grab Adnan afterwards when we've got the pizza and chilling. Adnan, just want to say thank you so much. You know, Adnan literally replied to me in a couple of seconds when I got in touch. So from what I understand, he's hugely supportive of who we are and what we're doing. So yeah, it's awesome to have you as our second speaker, and I think like the guys would agree with me. It was really, really awesome. So thanks so much.
No problem.